Hello. Unfortunately, Ruben couldn't be here this weekend because he's in Oxford visiting some friends of ours. And so, in his absence, I was going to do a excuse me. I was going to do a solo reviewing floor based on the game Catherine. Now, unfortunately, due to some mix-up with whoever supplies games2play.com, they haven't been able to send me it. I did receive The Darkness 2, though, and there'll be a text review later today, and Ruben and I will be reviewing that next week. So normal reviewing floor service will resume next week with The Darkness 2, but for now I thought I would start my solo series on horror games. I'm a bit of a horror fan myself. I mean, my favourite game of all time is Silent Hill 2, so I suppose in a way I've got to be classed as a horror fan. But I'm becoming increasingly disappointed with the amount of games these days that aren't real horror games. You know, like Resident Evil 5, for example. Resident Evil 5, Dead Space 2, that sort of thing. That comes out, and you think, well, in fact, Shadows of the Damned as well. I mean, Shadows of the Damned, I know it perhaps wasn't supposed to be a proper horror game, but it followed the same sort of formula. Or that's something of a bad example because I like Shadows of the Damned, but it's still, if it was supposed to be a horror game, it was pretty unsuccessful at it. But anyway, so I'm going to look back over various horror games that are genuine horror games and can be genuinely creepy, and I'm going to look at sort of things like the plotting in horror games is always quite rich, I find. The characters are usually quite decent, and just stuff like that. You know, all that lovely horror goodness. But the first game I wanted to look at was a very recent game, actually. 2010's Amnesia: The Dark Descent. I haven't got a box to hold up because it's only available via Steam. So yes, going to look at Amnesia: The Dark Descent and Amnesia Justine, its expansion pack. And for Amnesia Justine, I have my absinthe ready, which I will explain later. Anyway, so Amnesia: The Dark Descent and Amnesia Justine, they were made by Frictional Games back in 2010. Dark Descent came out, and basically they're first-person adventure games where you traverse environments, find key items to use in puzzles, and obviously it's a horror game as well, and it's entirely stealth-based. You know, there are no weapons in the game. There's no way of defending yourself. Your characters are very weak and can't take many hits, and generally the only way to continue is to sneak around. If a monster sees you, you can run away and hide, but in my experience, you can't rely on that at all. It's really, you got to hide from these things. Anyway, the basic, and unlike the reviewing floor, I'm not going to go into spoilers for these games because I think they're very horror games. In my experience, you shouldn't. The kind of game you shouldn't really spoil the ending for, particularly these ones, because Amnesia: The Dark Descent has one of the better plots I've seen in recent video games, and if you want to find out the plot, it's very easy. It's on various websites and things, but I'm going to keep it as spoiler free as I can. Anyway, basically, in The Dark Descent, you're this English man called Daniel, and you wake up in a big castle, and no one's around. You get up, you wander around, you find a note written to you by yourself, telling you that past Daniel has something bad's happened, and he's drunk this amnesia mixture, and that you have to track down and kill a man named Alexander of Brennenburg. And you're not told why or anything. Just find this Alexander guy and end him. Anyway, so you start to move around the castle, and it becomes increasingly apparent that this thing called the Shadow is following you, which is some sort of malevolent supernatural force that whenever it's around, it blows out all the lights and it makes this strange red fleshy substance appear out of nowhere, and it hurts you if you touch it, etc., etc. And as I said, I won't spoil the story, but there are some really good plot elements in here. Like when you start to find out why the Shadow is there, that's good. Why the Shadow is there, why Daniel took the amnesia mixture is a very, very well done. I think very well handled. It's a very good plot point, and basically who Daniel was before all this happened, what kind of man he was, his actions, what he got up to pre-Amnesia, and Alexander as well, because Alexander is, you never see him until the end of the game, but Alexander is this sort of he's the villain for the entire thing, but you start to learn more about his character as well and his motivations for his various actions, and it becomes apparent that not everything is as it seems with these characters. Anyway, as I said, the name of the game here is stealth, because if you get spotted by any of these creatures, you're in big trouble. It's hard. It's quite hard to explain without actually playing the game itself. I mean, even footage doesn't really do it justice. I mean, footage is certainly helpful, but because, for example, before I actually played through the game, I watched a Let's Play, and you watch people playing Amnesia, and you think, that doesn't look too bad. I reckon I could handle that. I've played a horror game or two in my time, and you boot it up, and it's very. Basically, I think what makes it scary is the pure feeling of helplessness, because you are just this unarmed, weak guy, and you have no idea what the hell is there. You're in these, some areas are large, some areas, large open empty spaces where anything could be. Some areas are just mazes. Like there's one particular area in a prison section of the castle which is just a maze, and there could be monsters anywhere. And I think one thing that definitely needs to be praised about the game is its music, made by Mikko Tamia, and I really hope I'm pronouncing that right, but if I'm not, I do apologise. But and it's a strange game to compare it to, but the music does a similar job to how the music worked in Left 4 Dead 2, in that all of the music in the game serves a particular purpose. It's not just background music or filler or any of that. The music actually has a meaning to it. Like, there's one type of music for, there are various pieces of ambient music that will either go, for example, there's one area where the music is very soothing and calm, and then you go into a next area and it'll be very bleak and dark and very tense. And the music that plays when the enemies are after you, like if something spots you and you hide, and it's just got this horrible, thundering, tense music as these things, just ruthlessly search for you. And the thing is, you can't look at the monsters. Well, you can, but the game implements a sanity meter, and things like staying in the dark for too long decreases your sanity, because apparently Daniel has nyctophobia. That always struck me as weird to begin with, because being in the dark, why would that make you insane? But apparently he has nyctophobia. Anyway, being in the dark, looking at scary events, and staring at the monsters, and so you can't look at these things for too long, which of course means you can't really look at them and where they're going. But the game is nicely balanced in that respect. If it's not like you need to keep careful tabs on these things and follow their every movement, but you can't because it makes you insane. You can rely on, if you hide in a dark corner, a decently dark corner. We're not talking like in a Manhunt, where if you hide behind the shadow of a park bench, no one can see you. We're talking about if you hide in a proper dark corner behind some boxes, say, these things aren't going to be able to see you, and they're not going to wander into the dark and find you. So the game is nicely balanced in that respect. But I'd say, the real feeling of fear in this game, and what makes it scary, is because you feel so helpless, and these things could be anywhere, and you know that they are there, but you have no idea where they're going to be. And it's the feeling of anticipation and tension and dread, in that you're in a very alien place with nothing to defend yourself, and these things want you dead, and any chance they get, they will kill you. And I think that's a nice take on horror games, I think, because I think removing that feeling of security that games like, you know, Resident Evil 5 and 4 as well. 4 I think partly escapes because it was a good game, but 4 again kind of is not survival horror, but kind of pretends to be. Doom 3 was another one, that sort of thing. Dead Space 2, the sort of game where it's not scary because you're packing some serious heat, and anything that comes at you is, you know, you can deal with. The enemies themselves also, there are only 3 types of enemy in the game, and one of them only appears for a couple of scripted sequences, and if you've played the game, yeah, that thing in the cellar archives, yeah, think about that. Anyway, the other 2 are human based, or at least, you know, human shaped. I'm not entirely sure where they came from. There are various backstories for them, but I think that's the point as well. These things look hideous and they sound like one of the enemies. It makes noises that sound like some sort of combination between a cow and a whale. And you hear this thing and you see it as well. You see what this thing looks like, and it's just, fuck, that thing used to be a man. What the hell happened to it? That ties in as well to all the backstory in the game. It's brilliant. It's just, you know, you hear about who Alexander was, what this castle, what's been going on in this castle, what he's been doing to people. You know, all of it just serves as well, so well. And I think a lot of people, myself included, I've been guilty of that with plenty of horror games in the past, but a lot of people, when they play horror games, I think, don't bother to, like, when you find, say, a journal entry or a note or something like that, you don't stop to read it, because it'll just be backstory and it won't necessarily be important to forward in the game. But this is a game where the backstory is really worth looking into and reading about, because, you know, it just helps to serve the atmosphere and this feeling of horror. Because at the end of the day, if a horror game is scary, that's all well and good, but horror games should be horrific. You know, they should be horrible. What's been going on in this situation should make you feel uneasy. It should harrow you. You should be thinking about it for days after and just running it through your mind. Whatever the hell has been going on here should make you feel uneasy, and that's what Amnesia does. Even in areas where, you know, even once you've finished the game and you look back over it and you think, oh, it's okay, this area doesn't have any monsters in it, you still feel uneasy. I mean, I finished the game a few months ago now, and I've started replaying it again, and I've been in areas where I know there aren't any monsters there, I know I can't get attacked in these areas, but it's still scary. It's still, you know, the dark, Daniel's hallucinations, because once your sanity level gets to a certain point, he starts hallucinating like bugs on the screen, and you hear babies crying in the distance, and you hear people screaming and things, and you just think, you know, I shouldn't, you know, as well. You've kind of got this feeling of, I shouldn't be in here. You know, I've opened this door. I need this, whatever it is, machine part, cog, whatever the hell you're looking for at this particular instance. But you think, I shouldn't be in here. There's probably something in there that wants to kill me, and I'm going to get in there. I'm going to find that machine part, and I'm going to get the hell out of here as quickly as my poncy English legs can carry me. But in terms of atmosphere, in terms of story, and in terms of its creatures and its soundtrack and everything, Amnesia: The Dark Descent is, as far as I'm concerned, it's pretty much spot on, you know, pretty much perfect. It's a very scary game, it's incredibly atmospheric, it's got a very good backstory written for it, and characters that you really do think about for a while after playing the game. Ugh, I mean, it's the beer. Anyway, and you know, this game does play on your mind. It's very psychology based, but I would feel also it's got a kind of a Lovecraft tint to it. It's got a definite Lovecraft feel, you know, sort of the protagonist going insane in these otherworldly creatures like the Shadow and the Kank. And if you play the game, you know what the Kank is. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it, but you know, the fish thing. That'll be fun for anyone that hasn't played it. Look forward to the fish thing, people. Anyway, and it's got a definite Lovecraft feel to it, and I think that works in its favour. You know, it's creepy, because if anything's creepy, it's Lovecraft. Anyway, I'm going to try and keep this video a bit shorter than the reviewing floor has been. So, in that regard, let's take a look at Justine. So, Absinthe at the ready. Justine, it's a very short expansion to the game where basically you wake up and there are phonographs leading you throughout these various areas with a woman on it who is presumed to be Justine, who tells you that there are these 3 people in this cabinet of pertination, as she calls it, and you can either save them or you can just kill them and move on. And there are these 3 people, these 3 men who they're blind, they've got wagon wheels around their necks for some reason, and they're staggering around naked, and it turns out they were Justine's lovers, and that she's blinded them and driven them mad with absinthe. See? Yeah? Yeah. Absinthe and laudanum, maybe? I don't know. Something else. There is laudanum in the game. You use it for health. But anyway, and she's turned these people mad, and she's stuck you in there to try and get her way through, and it's sort of supposed to be a test of character. And Amnesia Justine, it's very similar in terms of most of its gameplay elements to the Dark Descent. You sneak through these areas, you avoid the blind men. Tense and horrific soundtrack kicks in whenever they're chasing you or following you, which is a bit harder because they're blind, so it's harder for them to chase you. But some of them are really good at finding you, despite being blind. Anyway, and also the backstory for that one is incredibly rich as well. When you find out who Justine is, who these men were, you know, what kind of person she would have to be to do this horrible thing to them, and you know, and that one's also got a reasonable twist ending. It's not as good as Amnesia in terms of its plot twists, but I won't spoil that one either. But Amnesia Justine, and it's free as well. It's loaded into the game. You know, you buy Dark Descent, you get Justine with it, and so that's definitely worth a look. There's one part though that is infuriating the first time if you don't know what you're doing, and if you've played Justine, the third suitor when you're in the area with the water, that part, oh, that's irritating. But you know, it's not too unfair because, you know, it's reasonably handled and quite well balanced again, as I said. But the problem with Justine is if you die, you don't get any continues. Like in the Dark Descent, it saves you progress and everything, but in Justine it doesn't. But once you know where you're going, it's not that bad, and you know, you get through it once, and that'll be it. There isn't much reason to come back to Justine. To be fair, there isn't much reason to come back to Dark Descent, really. I mean, there aren't a lot. There's no unlockables. There's no extra features to anything. There's no real replay value in a sense, but it's still worth looking at every now and then. I mean, although to be fair, once you've finished it once, you're probably not going to get back over unless you're mad, or you're doing a retrospective for a YouTube channel. Anyway, Absinthe quickly. Magnifico. So yeah, to sum up, Amnesia: The Dark Descent, brilliantly written, incredibly atmospheric, tense, genuinely scary. I don't say that about a lot of games at all. I'm quite a fan of horror games, and I rarely find them scary, but Amnesia is genuinely very, very frightening. Justine as well, loaded in for free, short, sweet, very interesting again, decent characters, well plotted, and yeah, I mean, if you're gonna get it, I mean, you can only really get it off Steam in the UK. I'm not entirely sure about America, because I think in some parts of the world it's available on disc now, but if you're gonna get it on Steam, it's on sale all the time. I mean, sometimes it's half price, which makes it about £6. It's been on there for about £3.70 at one point, so if you're not entirely sure, if you're not sure enough about getting it to pay full price, you just wait for it to be on sale. It's on this in Steam or something. But you know, it came out in 2010, so you've probably heard about it. In fact, you've almost certainly heard about it. You may well have even owned it. But for the people that haven't owned it, if you like horror games and you haven't bought this game, what the hell is wrong with you? It's incredible. This is the new direction for survival horror. You know, as much as I hated the shitty tank controlling system in Resident Evil and that sort of thing, those games were creepy. Those games were scary, and they had a genuine weight to them. The way things are going nowadays with stuff like Resident Evil 5 and 6, by the looks of things, I'm just saying, that looks very similar to 5, and Dead Space 2. That's not survival horror. Amnesia: The Dark Descent it's proper survival horror. This is how survival horror is supposed to be. Tense, creepy, unsettling, terrifying at times, with a rich and well-written plot. That is how survival horror is supposed to be. Also, Frictional Games, they're an independent company with like a handful of members. There's hardly anyone works there, and for them to bring out a game of this quality is, you know, phenomenal. So also, if Frictional Games are watching, you've made one hell of a game. As I say, if you're a horror fan, you don't own this game, buy it. I guarantee you'll enjoy it. If you're not a fan of horror games, I would think twice about it, really, because this is the big one. This is scary. This is survival horror at its peak, really. So yeah. So that's about it, really. Check out Amnesia: The Dark Descent. Follow me on Twitter on the bottom link. Speaking of Cthulhu, and indeed H.P. Lovecraft, I didn't actually talk about Cthulhu, but I did talk about Lovecraft. So next game I'm thinking of doing is going to be Call of Cthulhu: Dark Corners of the Earth, which I also bought off Steam, and got midway through, and I don't remember what happened. I think I may have got stuck. But yeah, I'll probably be taking a look at Call of Cthulhu next week. Check back here next week for Catherine and the Darkness 2 on the reviewing floor, and a classics game that Ruben and I will take a look at, that it won't come as a surprise to many of you, but I don't know, you may all be surprised, so watch this space.